Good evening. Thank you for joining us for the virtual continuation of Bridge Builders, Conversations with Interesting People, presented by the Clinton Foundation and sponsored by Colson Oil. My name is Nate Thomas, and I serve as the Educational Programs Manager at the Clinton Foundation. Today, we are joined by Senator Chuck Robb and General Wesley Clark. Senator Robb has lived a life devoted to public service. As an officer in the Marine Corps, Senator Robb served our country in Vietnam. Later, he served as the governor of Virginia from 1982 to 1986, and the U.S. Senator from 1989 to 2001. Today, he's going to discuss his new book, In the Arena, a memoir of love, war, and politics. Our conversation today will be moderated by the incomparable General Wesley Clark. General Clark is a retired four-star general who served 38 years in the Army. He was appointed to his last assignment, commander of the U.S. European Command, by President Clinton. In that role, he served as Supreme Allied Commander, Europe, and led the NATO campaign in Kosovo. Currently, he is the chairman and CEO of Wesley K. Clark and Associates, and the founder of Renew America Together. Thank you both for being with us here today. And at the end of the conversation, General Clark will ask Senator Robb some questions that you all submitted ahead of time. As always, we appreciate your input, and let's jump right in. I'll turn the program over to General Wesley Clark.
Well, thank you very much, Nate, and thanks to the Clinton Center for having us together. And Senator Robb, it's just a great pleasure to see you and Lynda there. And we wish you were here with us in person. We'd love to have this crowd in Little Rock around you, listening to you speak and able to shake hands and share our warmth. You write in the book that one of your great friends, the president you knew most next to your father-in-law, Lynda Johnson, was Bill Clinton. And so I think it's really wonderful that you're here to share your thoughts with us today. Look, I want to start by saying that you burst onto the scene as a White House socialite. I remember being in the Army at the time and reading about it, but your life didn't start that way. Like a lot of us, you moved a lot. The finances weren't always that clear. You came from a family that was sometimes struggling, and it was difficult. Would you share with us a little about your growing up and how you came to be in the Marine Corps?
Well, let me say that I think probably the single and earliest, most important decision I made was to become a United States Marine. I later had an even more important decision to make, and she's sitting right beside me now. We have been a lifetime team. And it's been great. Lynda sometimes kids others said that he married the Marine Corps first. I'm just his mistress. In any event, we have a great team, and I'm delighted. I don't think that you all were anticipating that she was going to be here. She is a volunteer. There was no draft in this particular case. I'm delighted to have her beside me. But if I need correcting, I'm sure I'll get a little nudge on it. Anyway, I appreciate your willingness to do this and all of your service, which was just alluded to. We have crossed paths a few times, very briefly, but this will be the first time I've had a chance to really have a chat with you.
No, I remember when you were in the Senate and you were working to strengthen NATO. I think you were working with Sam Nunn and Senator Lugar on that committee. I would go over there at night occasionally. I was a 3-star at the time as J5. Charlotte Keeley was the chairman, and we always knew we had our best interests at heart. And we always appreciated what your patriotism, your sense of service, and your dedication to the men and women.
Thank you.
And it really came true. But we made you real mark in politics, and I guess none of us should be surprised. Obviously, and Lynda's here with you, you had a great coach and a great family sense of this. But what drove you into the public arena to take the risks, the reputational risks of getting into elective politics? It must have been a tough decision.
Well, it was not a tough decision. I have been doing for most of my life, I've had the opportunity to accept the challenges that I saw directly in front of me, and I didn't have to make a major shift in terms of career aspirations or other activities that might have changed the course of my life. When Lynda and I entered into our lifetime partnership, what's now, I've got to be careful, 52 years ago, I have to, it's the best I can remember. I do my best to remember birthdays, anniversary dates, and children and grandchildren, but and Lynda will remind me of anything else. Incidentally, I'm having difficulty seeing you at the moment because there's somebody is working with a screen directly in front of me in a way that blocks me from seeing you. Any event, I'm very delighted that I've had this opportunity to spend all of my adult life, certainly, in the arena. And I commend you for spending all of your adult life so far in the arena.
Well, thank you very much, Senator. It's been a real pleasure. So, you made your first run. You decided to run for lieutenant governor, and you knew the lieutenant governor didn't have much power in Virginia, but you made the call to run for it anyway. How did you feel about that? Did you feel like it was going to be like a risk-free sort of easy entrance into politics, or did you feel like it was going to be like a second fiddle and you might get burned even trying to hold a tune? What was it like?
Well, I made a decision. This was after a number of incidents that are in the book for those who are interested. But in any event, Lynda sometimes kids me a little bit. She said, I made a decision to go to law school and to go to law school at the University of Virginia before I ever even told her. And she would have been happy, I think, if I had stayed in and as a career Marine officer. I told her, I'm home now. But there's no guarantee that I would always be home. And in any event, she, as she has with so many other decisions that I've made, she has been very supportive and extremely important to whatever success I may have been able to garner along the way.
So, Lynda, you weren't at all concerned when he threw his hat in the ring to be lieutenant governor? You kind of knew, you could kind of see it unfolding, right? It was like seductive. You get started in it, you win, and how do you stop? And then it just consumes your life, right?
Well, I said I would never marry anybody in politics. By that time, I had quite a few years of supporting somebody in politics. But Chuck, when he was in law school, found a person that he respected very much, Bill Spong, Senator Spong, and he was in a tough race. And so this person who had been non-political and had never been given me any reason to think I was going to get back into this arena, he took me in. But it was because he appreciated what Senator Spong had done and the changes he was trying to make in Virginia. And so Chuck said, I want to help too. And that's how we all got in this again. And we've been doing it since 1977. So we've had a pretty good run.
1967. Does it seem that long?
Oh, no. We've been married since 67.
That's
I
right.
just mean that you got involved in politics yourself. And for your first race was in 77. And it was wonderful. And public service is something that we all should do. And now, Chuck, you talk about that part.
Okay. Well, I happen to be a very strong believer in the fact that everyone ought to contribute in some way or another to what we inherit. Most of us didn't fight to have the privileges that we enjoy today. We had forebears that fought and or in some cases gave their lives so that we could be born, we could enjoy the fruits of their long-time effort, and most of it in public service. I always thought that it made sense for people who want to continue or want to improve on whatever circumstances that they confront them at any particular time, that they get in the arena to help in ways that they can. And one of the things that I had been a proponent of for a long period of time, Sam Nunn, you mentioned, was a co-conspirator, if you will. We wanted to set up a program that had a means of voluntary service for those who were so inclined. It didn't have to be military service, and that was the big change. The draft laws used to make sure that all of the then limited to men who were of certain age were subject to being drafted. And I always liked the idea that we could deal with it, particularly in the Marine Corps. We used the draft a little bit in the early part of the Vietnam War, and then just haven't used the draft really since. And there are some very, very good people that come in through that particular access to the service. But it's helpful to have people who want to be there and believe that it's their duty, and it's something that they can get personal satisfaction from making a contribution. And I have used the quote from Teddy Roosevelt that ends with "in the arena." I've got it here someplace. I will just quote the part of it that has always been an inspiration to me. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows the end of the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place will never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory or defeat. That has always been an inspirational quote for me. I'll cite one other one. I don't know that I maybe have this in the book, I've forgotten. But the Serenity Prayer. God grant me the strength to, the wisdom, I don't have this, God grant me the strength to do what I can, or whatever it is, to not do things that I'm unable to do, to do the things that we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I've always felt that everybody should have some skin in the game, so to speak, and benefits greatly from it. I think our society benefits when we get a chance to meet many people we might not otherwise encounter during the course of our lives, and who can enrich our lives. I think there are very few instances where I've had an opportunity to meet people from very different walks of life and didn't benefit from it and grow from the experience, and think that our country was stronger when we tried to work together. And that's not always easy to do. And that's one of the challenge of leaders, to see if we can find a way to entice enough people to join with us in common cause for a common goal, which is very satisfactory. I mean, I think that my life would have been far less enriching, interesting, however you want to describe it, if I hadn't accepted the opportunities that came along. And I'm sure that you feel the same way about your time in service, starting back at West Point or throughout that course of time, that you were in the arena and could do something that you felt was contributing to the long-term success of this little enterprise called the United States of America that we all enter into, and could contribute to it. And it's just, I feel much better when I know that I've been a part of some, even the things that are difficult. And sometimes anytime you get in the political process in particular, or any other government role, you can be subjected to all kinds of critiques, not always friendly, that you may feel the misfortune of slings and arrows, or whatever the case may be. But if you prevail, for me at least, it's a very good feeling. And because I had a lot of success in the Marine Corps, particularly right up front, way before I met this pretty young lady on my left, so I had put my marker down, and I knew I was capable of leadership that would be useful, based on my own convictions. And I think, as I try to point in the book, I think it's always important that people earn the respect of those that they are going to be called upon to lead, and that they set an example, and that they establish their word, if you will, that their personal integrity never be legitimately questioned for any particular reason. You can disagree with particular ideas that may be placed before you, and you can debate those as we do in the whole process of government, but particularly the Congress. But you don't need to try to demonize the person who may have a different point of view, and may or may not fully understand that point of view in some cases. That doesn't really advance the cause. So public service for me has always been very rewarding.
Well, I grew up in kind of the same era you did, Senator. I remember that Roosevelt quote, and I always felt the same way. And but I wonder today whether young people really have that sense or not. I remember when President Nixon put the volunteer force in, and I was a captain at Fort Knox, and I came in one morning at my company, my third company. I'd been shot up, and I was back at Fort Knox. It was July of 1970. And the first sergeant said, I said, "Where's Reveille formation?" He said, "No Reveille, no more formations. Decisions made. We're going volunteer army." It was so confusing. And yet, today when you think about mandatory public service, people just blanch. I was on CNN back during the Iraq War, maybe 2003, 2004, and one of the young producers said, "Oh, General Clark, you've had such an interesting life." I said, "Well, you could have it too. You should join the armed forces. How old are you?" She said, "Oh, I'm 24. I said, "Well, you're plenty young to come in." She said, "Oh," she said, "I could never give up my freedom."
You got to fight for your freedom.
This is the problem now.
I think that our screens are having some difficulty keeping up with whatever is in the electronic phase. But what was the point I was going to make?
You have to be willing.
Yeah, that's right. There have to be some causes for which you feel strongly enough, or some situations in which you feel strongly enough. The safety of your spouse and children or grandchildren, whatever the case may be, and other things that you're willing to put your life on the line to protect, preserve, and promote those freedoms that we all enjoy. Lynda's mother always had a quote that she sometimes used when people would ask her why she got involved in some of these things. And she said, "I think that's the way I pay my rent." I thought that summed it up very nicely.
But Senator, now would you say, with the experience of your hindsight and what you've been through and the legislation and knowing the American people, should we try to reinstitute some kind of compulsory national service, even not military service, but in some way, so that every young American or middle-aged American has an obligation to put a year in to help their country, maybe working in the forests, in the environment, or in construction and infrastructure, or in the military? Should we have that program? Should we stand for it?
Let me say that all of those are admirable pursuits for anyone in life. And I think that to the extent that we can make more or create an environment where more and more people want to serve, but I'm not averse to the question of possibly making it compulsory in some form, certainly not military alone, so that people can serve in some capacity. Again, as I thought I alluded to a minute ago, I think that enriches all of us to have that experience, to deal with folks that you might not otherwise meet, to be in a situation, and particularly in the military, where you're willing to put your life on the line for the guy on your right, the guy on your left, and the woman. That's right. And I'm very proud of my Marines for now opening up additional opportunities for women to not only serve and in combat situations, on which is voluntary on their part at this point, but lead in those situations. We're stronger because we can tap a whole a much larger pool of talent. I found that true in government too. That I appointed a number of men and women of color, women that hadn't enjoyed the opportunity to be in charge, weren't necessarily involved in the policy process. That they were doing custodial jobs in many cases, or relatively minor jobs down in the food chain, but they weren't really given an opportunity to lead. I think that the most, I won't make any single highlight for everything that we've done in the last 15, 20 years, but I will say that to the extent we have looked to a much larger pool of very talented people, we benefit enormously. Lynda and our daughters, at least our eldest daughter, Lucinda, whom you, I think, have met, they have both been very active in a number of causes, but many of them relate to finding ways to incorporate more and more women or others who have not been included in the whole equation in the past, and I'm very proud of them.
Well, Senator, one of the things you really did well when you went into politics is you rebuilt the Democratic Party in Virginia. And when you went into it, it was all about Republicans. Now, we got a lot of people watching from Arkansas, and we're in a state right now where we have no Arkansas Democrats on the state ticket. Congress, officers, the Senate, it's all in Republican hands. How did you think about rebuilding and strengthening the Democratic Party in Virginia when you found yourself challenged with the ascendance of the Republican Party?
One of the things, it was clear to me that we had to get our act together, if you will, and I appointed a commission of friends. In this case, I didn't have any statutory authority, but a number of people, and I think it was at that point that I established the commission. Well, that was the end of my term, I guess. But I got a group of people, and I asked Bill Spong to lead that. Bill, to bless his soul, was never terribly charismatic. He was just a very solid human being who did things because he believed they were right. And it's hard to fault anybody who is following their conscience and trying to do the right thing. In any event, that we got a lot of buy-in on that, and we were able to attract enough people to that effort, and we've been doing it in other venues since. One of the things that I was particularly pleased to be able to get Bill Clinton to join us was when we put together the Democratic Leadership Council. I knew, and I had to work extra hard because he wasn't the first to volunteer for that particular effort. But I knew he had skills, not only of mine, but of communication ability, that if we could incorporate him in that effort, it would reach a whole lot more people. And it did. And that organization formed the basis of his campaign for president.
Well, one of the things you did was you sort of divorced yourself from the, I could call it this, the left wing of the Democratic Party, or at least the national party, because in your book, you said it didn't quite work for you in Virginia. And then you formed the Democratic Leadership Council, and you moved this nationally. So if you look at where we are in the Democratic Party today, do you see the same issues coming up again, that we're going to have a split between the centrists and the Democratic Party and the progressives, and it's going to hamper our ability to maintain our leadership role? I mean, I know Joe Biden has got it together right now, but the headlines every day are talking about the pull from the left on this issue or that issue. How do you see that working?
Well, that's a problem, and we did have that problem, and it's always going to be a problem that we have to continue to address and to challenge and to renew the enthusiasm of those who seem to be headed in the right direction. And for too long, the Democratic Party appeared to be very little more than a collection of all of the limited interest groups that made up the the whole party. And they were clearly always very responsible for the heart and soul of the party. But in some cases, they did not seem to be open to those who didn't share those particular views. And so we needed to find a way to bring those of us who were more committed to a strong national defense and fiscal responsibility. I always try to put that in with those who had great ambition, but were a little afraid if they gave too much ground to those of us who wanted to broaden the base, that they would lose the opportunity to make the changes they wanted to make. So eventually we got enough people to think that, yes, if we work together, we can accomplish many of our common objectives. And that was an important part of it. So it became proper within the party and for Virginians to elect Democrats, because they were very much concerned that everybody was hopelessly anti-war in everything, and that they were not committed to the same ideals, as well as those who had been too close at one point or another to Jim Crow and that whole tragic part of our history. We had to work hard. In putting the Democratic Leadership Council together, I wanted to have the first person be a member of the House, and we did. Dick Garber did a very good job at that point, and then later ran for president himself. But I wanted to make sure that we got a broad cross section. So I went out and personally recruited several mayors of color and a number of women,
Barbara Jordan.
particularly Barbara Jordan. I worked harder on Barbara Jordan than almost anybody, but maybe than Bill Clinton, because Bill Clinton, I don't think he was initially sure that we were going to cooperate as much with the part of the party which he already clearly had allegiance from. And I think we were able to convince him that we needed all of the parts, all of the elements of the party, and we need to work together. And he carried that message beautifully. And that led to a major resurgence. Many people, initially elected officials who are responsible for carrying out whatever promises are made during the course of a campaign, were able to get together with those whose real passion was to make sure that their issues were properly addressed. And so we brought the folks together, and it was just something that had to happen. And I can see our friends on the other side of the aisle right now are looking at the same kinds of issues, not necessarily the same issues that we had to deal with. And it's too easy for someone to want to write off a party because they think it's hopelessly out of touch with what we really need to move forward. And I was very proud of the fact that we were able to make it respectable to be a Virginia Democrat again.
Well, it seems to, when I read your book, it just brought back such perspective on the issues we faced as a country. Because when you just read the newspaper, it seems like these issues are fresh. Well, where did this come from? And, we never heard of this issue before. But in fact, these issues just keep rolling through. Now we've got the issue in front of us with the whole problem of the electoral system. We've got gerrymandering. Well, there's nothing new about gerrymandering. That's been going on for a long time. And we've got the revival of restrictive voting practices, which should have been put away a long time ago. And we've got the issue, one which must be near and dear to your heart, and certainly your experience of the filibuster. As a senator, you were independent. You did what you thought was right. You spoke you listened to your conscience, and you voted your conscience. But
I am of the belief that you can never get in trouble if you follow your conscience. If you believe that you're telling the truth, that your integrity is respected, you will be great deal of credit for standing up for what you believe is right. If you may not always be right, but if you're willing to put aside whatever the appeal of simply taking on the popular issues and not being willing to address the tough issues. There's plenty of tough issues that need to be addressed over a long period of time. And I got more satisfaction in government when I could stand up for something that I knew I was going against the popular opinion, but I knew that I was right in the long run, that would be demonstrated. And fortunately, in each case that I did that, and that became a part of my DNA, much as the Marine Corps did it in many other ways. And the fact that both of those aspirations could work along the same general track was particularly useful. And I hope that people that get a chance to read the book, as you have now, will enjoy seeing some of the machinations that are involved in this whole pudding making contest or bread making contest that can be difficult. And we need people that will speak up for their true convictions and not carry on something that they know in their heart of hearts is wrong. And just simply because they believe that they can't ever back down from whatever crazy notion of fact that they may have adopted, find it difficult to come over. And we're not going to win. Joe is not going to win as president if he only continues to, or if he is a leader of those who only want to criticize the other party. It was helpful in getting him elected, no question. But if we don't offer constructive ways to solve problems, we could very easily fall back into the arena that you were just referring to.
So Senator, how should we today think about the issue of the filibuster? You know, we've got Democratic senators who want to preserve it, apparently. We've got a 50-50 split in the Senate. We've got this incredibly important bill on voting, H.R. 1, that will restore Voting Rights Act privileges and stop partisan gerrymandering, do a lot of things that seem to be important for democracy. And yet, we're up against the tradition of the Senate and the filibuster. And how should we think about it? You spent 2 terms in the Senate. You know all these people. You know the traditions. Should we honor the tradition of this filibuster, or is it something whose time has passed and we need to just move on?
Well, I was never a fan of the filibuster. I thought if we had that whoever was going to engage in a filibuster ought to stay right there on the floor. There, unfortunately, is a tradition. It's not really a tradition as such, but there is a long history of people who speak too long on single issues. The rest of the chamber is pretty much empty. If you force whoever wants to threaten with a filibuster, and all they have to do is get the requisite number of votes to close the debate, you eliminate the necessity of sticking right there on the floor. And it was not used much during the time that I was there. I was never a fan of it. I thought it was not as a constructive tool. I understand what leaders sometimes need to do. A lot of times they can resolve difficult questions because of their ability to hand out something that will help a particular member in their home state or their home district, whatever the case may be. I was always skeptical of that, but I realized after time, and Sam Nunn and I were on the same page on that one, we would frequently be concerned about a whole lot of amendments that showed up with in a nighttime session or just something that happened to appear that didn't enjoy the broad-based support that they should, or weren't always debated at the time they should have been. But if you can simply bring the whole process to a halt with a single individual, I mean, I always thought that the toughest legislative role in the world is probably to be in charge of half of the people, and the other half are responsible to another leader, and it's, for whatever reason, that gives them real power, and a single individual is capable of shutting the whole process down. And I don't like that. I understand why many on my side of the aisle, our side of the aisle, want to continue that, because they believe that it's the only way they're going to accomplish some particular issue or legislative pursuit that would otherwise not be available to them. That you have to use the inability to get at least 10 folks from the other side to sign on with you to continue with the whole legislative process. So I have never been a big supporter of the filibuster. I thought if we're going to have it, you ought to have to stand there and continue to until your voice gives out, as mine is trying to do right now. So that ought to be the penalty for seeking that particular way to resolve an issue. But if it was to go away, I would not have any tears shed for its elimination. And I've acknowledged that for some causes, there is a strong belief that the only way that they can do it or stop it is with the filibuster. I believe that if a majority of either body believes that whatever they're putting forward is right for the American people and as a matter of conscience, they believe that they're doing the right thing, that it is not the end of the world to have it. But at the same time, I would like to take it out of the equation. And I know that there are any number of causes, as I say, that identify possible success with the continuation of the filibuster. That's not really voting. That's voting with a process that doesn't allow the majority to prevail.
You're exactly right. But, you know, when I hear you speak about how the Senate works and so forth, I go back to the way we used to teach it in political science. When I learned it at West Point, they called it log rolling. And so, and we had a congressman from Arkansas, Wilbur Mills, who was chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, who was, he was the greatest log roller ever. He could scrape money from one thing and another, bring consensus by building courthouses or a new bridge or whatever.
That's exactly right.
But we've done so much to open up and make good governance in Congress. We've added television, of course, on the floor, so everything's televised. We got rid of earmarks. We ended the seniority system on chairmanships. And I wonder if these things have complicated the task of governance in the United States Senate. I mean, I've read all the history books on President Johnson, and he was a master of the Senate and using these tools. And I wonder if he wouldn't feel today constrained by the fact that everything's on television. He can't build a courthouse. He can't offer any benefit, and it just becomes ideological and partisan.
Well, he was a can-do man, and he knew where he wanted to go, and he knew how to get there. And he was as good at legislation as anybody ever, probably. But he would use whatever of those tools that were available to him with great skill, and accomplish some very desirable results in the process. He sometimes, and this was true of the civil rights legislation, Everett Dirksen, for instance, he was able to somehow convince Everett Dirksen that he was the one who was going to be ultimately responsible for bringing the country forward in that particular area. So he had him, he was a critical person to have in his corner, and he had a lot of influence within the rest of the Republican Party at that point. If people see that whoever is a proponent is offering is really good for the whole country, not just one person in one congressional district or in one particular area, I think they'll line up. But it takes a strong leader. I've used the phrase a number of times, including the foreword to my book that Bill Clinton used to. Why am I suddenly? I talked myself right out of where I was going. what was the phrase that I use? I use it all the time. This is a senior moment. You have to be compassionate enough to care and strong enough to I mean, and
You said strong enough to govern in the book.
strong enough
Strong enough to govern.
Yes, I've used that so many times that I sometimes forget exactly what I'm quoting. And that I acknowledge I'm not what I used to be. I used to be able to do at least 100 push-ups pretty quickly and not feel I'm way down below that. I'm down below 50 now. So that it's a real struggle. Same thing with my ability to remember things that I know are important, or when I start a sentence, to remember where I was headed when I started the sentence. That's a definite sign of something that says you're just getting old.
I think, Senator, if you're still doing 50 push-ups, you're doing really well. And
I'm only doing 40 now. I don't want to make a claim that, again, it's my credibility at stake.
And you've given us a lot of wisdom in this book. If the other side came to you, and Kevin McCarthy came to you, or Mitch McConnell, and they said, "Look, you've been through this in the Democratic Party. My God, look what's happening to our Republican Party. What should we do?" What kind of advice would you give them?
Neither Mitch nor Kevin have sought my advice on this question, but I think if they'll look at some of the things that we did on the Democratic side, they would find that there is some real wisdom in how to put a party back together, if you will. And as I say, I'm not being sought out for comment by the other side right now. I don't know as many people. I do know that the people that I served with on both sides of the aisle were by and large very capable, bright, and dedicated public servants. And I was concerned anytime some of those folks on the other side of the aisle were leaving the Senate for whatever reason. And in some cases, they were replaced by someone who is far more ideological. And that's always makes it a little bit harder. But in any event, I believe that we have to work together, and anything that's going to last has to enjoy broad-based support. I was very supportive, and I've used an example before, and I'd use it in my book. John Chafee, in his hideaway in the Senate, actually in the Capitol itself, I spent more time in his hideaway working on bipartisan legislation that required bipartisan support and trying to make sure that I got it out in front. And he would convene this group, and it involved a number of other Democrats who were not quite as ideological, but were more concerned about finding consensus. And then when John Chafee died, I went out to see his remains off from Andrews to fly back up to Rhode Island. And it was a very emotional time. And I hated to see, and I met with his staff right after the plane departed with his casket aboard. And I said, "You had the privilege of working for a very good man who made a lot of things work in this system. And I will be forever grateful to the contribution that he made to the whole process." There are any number of other instances where people work together. If not always as successful, if you spend all the time touting your own successes or whatever, and just quietly work, gain the trust. I'll go back to that any number of times. I think that's critical to any success for anybody in a position of leadership or anything else in life almost. You need to have your children trust you. You need to have your colleagues in whatever business you're involved in. They need to trust you. Know that you are doing your best to do what you believe is best for whatever the enterprise is, or our country.
Any jackass can kick down a bar.
Oh, yes. Lynda was quoting her father, any jackass can kick down a barn.
It's harder to build it, yeah.
In any event, it's that kind of people that I want in public service. And and because I was willing to cross the line, and I've appreciated the fact that even though they, as a party and their political operatives worked very hard to defeat me, both in Virginia or in lieutenant governor and governor, that I was asked to come back in by Republicans in positions of authority. President George W. Bush asked me to co-chair the WMD Commission, with which I know very familiar. And he had been supporting his party candidate in that particular election, and asked me to come. And Larry Silverman, a federal judge, asked him. And so it was a bipartisan commission from the start. I'd gotten an earlier call. I don't know how deep I should get into this, but a certain vice president at that time said, we promised to have at least one Democrat in the cabinet, and called me after I lost re-election in 2000, when I was already headed down. I was down in the ranch with Lynda's mother, who was still alive at that point, where we frequently celebrated the holidays, and it was clearly providing, sealing me out if I would be interested. And I very much appreciated the fact that they thought, and two or three other things that I got involved in with Republican administrations, because I think they thought they could trust me, and their trust was well placed. We came up with a report. In that case, we said that the people involved in the whole intelligence collection process were good people. They just came up with the wrong intelligence on that particular case. And most people were disappointed in that particular commission, as an example, didn't give a very partisan report that specifically singled out for direct criticism members of the other side. And I took it as a personal compliment and a vote of confidence when any number of the people who were in leadership positions in the whole intelligence community were kind enough to invite me, after we had issued this report that the intelligence community was just wrong, would I come and speak to their group and talk about why we could do whatever you found criticism for better. And I thought that's the way the process can work and ought to work. It doesn't necessarily mean that you always call back somebody who wrote a report that you just flat disagree with. But I in much the same way that I don't want to get into a whole Vietnam discussion right now, but a lot of people simply were uncertain that that was in our long-term best interest. But I never thought that the people that were working on those decisions were doing anything that they knew to be contrary to our country's interest. They were honest efforts to accomplish what we saw as our mission at that particular point in time. And I benefited from that. Anytime I've been in an electoral contest, I have ended up being, in almost all cases, good friends after the contest was over. The last two times, I'll mention a name here because it worked out very well. Marshall Coleman was Attorney General when I was Lieutenant Governor. We were obviously set to run against each other for governor. We did. I prevailed in that particular instance. Later on, when I ran for the Senate, I think, let's see, this was the last, no, in 94. Am I?
Yes.
Okay, in 94, I guess it was. He came in and ran against me for the Senate and two others. And we've been friends. He is now a member of our church right here in McLean, is where we're seated right now, which is where we're located. He was living in Richmond earlier. We've become friends, and he comes over to our holiday open house. The same thing with at least one of the other opponents that I had in a primary. And I do the same thing with somebody in a general election, if I thought they were anywhere close enough that we wouldn't just be starting a fight.
Well, Senator,
anyway, that's important to me.
Senator, you established your record as someone who had integrity, someone who could work across the aisle and work for the great benefit of the American people. Now, I want to ask you the final question here. They call this series the Bridge Builders. And so the idea is to build a bridge to future generations. And so we're going to ask you to offer a call to action, a charge to each person in attendance to learn more or do something that adds to the bridge that together we're building into the future. So what's your call to action for our audience tonight?
My call to action would be the title of my book, Get in the Arena. If you see something that can be extended or ought to be changed, be a part of the effort to bring that apart. I don't think there's any more satisfying way to make change than to be a part of it. Take responsibility. It doesn't mean you have to necessarily put your life on the line in combat, but you need to be willing to support all kinds of effort that, in the belief of most of the people who you respect, is in the best long-term best interest of this country that we all inherited, and we want to continue to make it better. That's one of the things that I have particularly focused on things in terms of Virginia or many other southern states who had to deal with the whole question of enslavement of fellow human beings. And we have moved past that. I had the privilege, I think in answer to one of your earlier questions, to point a number of people who had not been called upon for service in important roles. I had the privilege of appointing the first African-American justice to the Supreme Court of Virginia. If I'd had more challenges, more opportunities, I would have done even more of that. But I did for the things that are within the power of the governor to appoint. Over 3,000 appointments during a period of time. I looked wherever I could to find people that had enormous talent and had not been really called upon to use some of that talent in a way that could move the whole cause that we share forward. So in any event, that's, as I said earlier, voting against something that was politically popular, but was politically popular but wrong. I thought I felt better. Always, I felt I've done my job, but I'm going to pay a political price for it, and that's fine. People, and I would tell people who'd come for me for advice and counsel, if you have a different position, particularly based on your own religion, and simply cannot in good conscience support this, don't cave to the popular political side if that is clearly your true feelings and belief. Stand up for whatever it is that you believe is very strong. Tell people that it was, and I would always say they will respect you for your courage in taking a position that is not politically popular for whatever reason.
Senator, we really thank you. You've given us a strong call to action. And more than that, you and Lynda have given us a tremendous example of your lives, your family, your public service, your patriotism, your commitment to this country. And your book is a real gift in that respect. I hope all of our audience will buy it and read it and really study it, because there are many, many, many pearls of wisdom in it. We thank you very much for being with us.
I thank you, and our publisher thanks you, because I have an obligation to try to make sure that they get their nickel back.
Well, I hope our audience will read it.
And again, I thank you for all that you have done to contribute to exactly what the same values that both of us seem to share in any way I can think of it, any way you can slice it. I don't know. I don't detect any serious differences in the way we approach it. Anyway, thank you. And thank you, Bill Clinton, who offered, when I asked him if he would do the foreword for the book, and he said, I'll be happy to do a book party for you as well. And he was true to his word on that. We have many, many great stories of our interaction over the years. And we each had a chance to address the other states JJ dinner, like back to when we used that terminology, over a period. And when Bill and Hillary came to Richmond, they stayed with us in the governor's mansion. And we had an opportunity after the JJ dinner had concluded and everybody came back, went to bed, got up the next morning, had breakfast. And Bill and Hillary were talking about a number of things.
Just Bill. Just Bill.
Oh, just Bill. I'm sorry, just Bill. See, that's the reason I've stuck with her 52 years and counting. She's not afraid to give me a collar sign.
Now,
Senator,
Okay.
they always say that behind every great man is an even greater woman.
There you go. And I am the beneficiary.
or beside.
And you are too.
Well, I think all America has been the beneficiaries, Senator. I think all America has been the beneficiary of your family, your leadership, your commitment, and your own answering the call to get into the arena. So I hope all of those who listen will heed the advice and get in there and help us. The country needs us today just as much as it did. It needs honest people with integrity and with courage, and you set the example, both of you have, in your lives. We thank you for being with us in the Bridge Builders program.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.